Rick, let's do a show that's titled It's All Neutral. You kind of mentioned this in the previous podcast, and I was like, that's interesting. Let's riff about that for a minute. So kick us off, please.
I think what I was referring to was the idea that all of the externals that happen to us, every circumstance, whether it's relationship driven, career driven, self imposed, all of those things are basically things that are coming to us and that we're processing. But when you look at what is coming at us, if you were to take the 50,000-foot view and just look at what happens, I was fired from Snell and Wilmer, a prestigious big firm 30 years ago when I was a young lawyer. That was devastating to me. But the reality is that that firing, that dismissal of me as a lawyer from that firm, whether I thought it was justified or not, has nothing to do with it. That is a fact. Now, I could look at that in a couple of different ways. I could say, this is showing that I'm incompetent. This is showing that I should be an artist instead of a lawyer. This is showing all kinds of negative things. That's one way. Another way to look at it is to say, this is an opportunity for me to open my own firm or go with other lawyers in a culture that I prefer. Other ways of looking at it can control how you then proceed. One path out of the negative is not helpful. The other path out of seeing it positive allows for growth. So what I was saying about neutrality was the notion that if you really think about it, everything that happens in life is basically like physics, you know? It's not, here's an example. When I was going camping with people who were unfamiliar with the wild, and I like to go to places that are remote, I like to go very, very, how would I say, hardcore. I like to go a long time. I like to go in the middle of nowhere, and you're out there. You hear coyotes at night and all of the rest. When I started to go with other people, I realized that people have this idea like nature is going to kill you, or a snake is going to follow you, and a snake is going to grab you in the night and wrestle you just because they're mean and evil and they don't have any understanding of snakes or how things work. The reality is that's just nature. That's just nature. And so you take precautions and you respect it. But on the other hand, you realize that it's just neutral. It's just the way life works. It's part of the mandala. It's part of how all things function. And if you could take everything that happens to you and say, this is an absolutely valueless thing, and that valueless means no good or no bad. Not that it doesn't have inherent value in some way, but not good or not bad. And just say, it's just a neutral thing. Okay, how am I going to deal with it? What path am I going to take out of here? Is it something that's going to grind me or something that's going to enlighten me? And so the path of suffering is really your own path that you've created, making neutral circumstances into things that you judge as bad or harmful or terrible. Well, those things are the value that you've given them. And I said before on these podcasts, it's very, very hard, but I think the way that you give the most compassion to yourself and you're able to live the fullest life is by realizing that you have the power. You have the inherent power. You don't need anyone else to give it to you. You got it right now. You have the power to make a decision about what affects you, what brings you down, what brings you up. But the reality is, it's all neutral. You only have the ability to give the power to it and the value to it that you want to give it. And that's volitional. You can control that. How can I control getting fired from Snell and Wilmer? Well, take a day and grieve and feel like, you're a victim and all the other crap that we do. And we feel like we didn't get what we wanted. But the reality is, step back and just give yourself that one day. And then the next day, start thinking, hey, this is just a neutral thing that happened. It's the world, it's nature, it's the way physics works. Now, what are the pathways out?
Rick, I completely agree. I love this idea, and I found myself it really resonating with me more and more. Like, it's always been true, but my awareness of the truth is finally catching up to that truth. And it's this whole idea that you mentioned, things aren't good or bad, they're just what is. And when you can accept that, when I began to accept that, it was a game changer for me. Not taking things personal. This person is out to get me. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. your response to it is what you want to continue to keep neutral. You don't get too high, and if you don't, then you don't run the risk of attachment. You don't get to too low, and then you minimize the risk of resisting and suppressing and being defensive and all the other negative behaviors that we do when we're not actually in any kind of danger, like real danger, not perceived danger, but real danger. And the way that you know whether or not you are treating situations as neutral is watch somebody who's wise. Watch somebody that no matter what happens in life, they're always nice and steady. Now,
Yeah.
to the person who's egoic, they will be like, that person just is not in touch with reality. They don't really get it. Oh, they get it. You don't get it. They're like, man, my husband or my wife, this and that. Like this other person, oh, this person's let them walk all over them. No, 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 no. That's not what's happening. They're like, just because this looks like a mess on the outside, they're not making it a mess on the inside. So the other people that are not neutral in these situations, well, they have no control of themselves. They're trying to have control of the outside world by judging it and labeling it and assigning value to it. But that only, causes suffering, one way or the other. But the wise person, and I'm trying to be wiser, is that I don't assign those kind of values to it. It's not good. It's not bad. People often ask me, "Aren't you excited about going on vacation?" You know what? When the vacation gets here, yeah, I'll be blissed and turned on. But you know what? I'm turned on and blissed out right here. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm neutral when it comes to that. And I'm also getting to a nice place where I'm consistently not making certain things about win or lose. I'm really good about other things because I practice on those. But when it comes to other things that can be competitive and my ego's all tied up into it, like this pickleball thing, I used to have a problem on the court because it wasn't a good game unless we won. And then that has levels to it. Okay, we won, but we really won because my partner was better and they carried me. So I'm beating myself up for not playing better myself. So I'm just ruining all these moments. But then once I make it not about that, but making it about, I'm just out here to have a good time. Hopefully I play well, but if I don't play well, it's still about having a good time. That's what's primary. And what's more about what kind of person am I on the court? That's what it's really about. Am I like making it a better experience for everybody else? And so, but if I can be neutral, I can see that that's a choice in those moments. When you're neutral, you can see that there's always a better moment. There's a better way to interact with that moment. When you're not being neutral, you are at the effect of what happens outside of you. And that's a precarious place to be and one that's wrought with suffering. What are your thoughts, Rick?
Wow, that's a powerful message, Keith. That if people could get that would expand their human capacity to deal with all sorts of burdens. I mean, we characterize things badly. I think we go out of our way to make things horrible for ourselves. I think that's just part of the victim mentality, which I had for many years. I had one mentor that really helped me with this issue. And this was probably 30 years ago, 25 years ago. And I was just starting to do meditation at the time. And I was explaining how I had all of these things and I couldn't deal with them all. And I felt overwhelmed. And he was saying, well, let's isolate each one of these deals. And we went through, and I actually did some journaling with this exercise that he suggested and just journaled about what my fears were. And writing them down, by the way, is a very, very important process that allows you to let go, or it can allow you to let go. And what he said with all of these, his first thing was, oh, after I would spin out the horror story, he would say, oh, that's interesting. He wouldn't say it's good, it's terrible. Oh, how can you live, you poor guy? Whoa, whoa, whoa. That's what I wanted. But what he would say would be, yeah, that's really interesting. And then he would go through this stuff I never thought about. And I'm thinking, Well, don't you realize how deeply hurt I am? How terrible this was of the other person? It's not fair, and it happened right on top of the time when the chili burnt, and my shoes didn't weren't were, you know, were holy, and and I had this whole cascade of nonsense. But at each venue, he kept saying it's interesting, and it made me so damn mad because he wasn't getting the value that I had put on it, and that was his message. He was in essence saying to me, every time you complain, every time you're bitching about something that you can't change, you're basically creating your own hell. And he said, why don't you just look at it as a portion of life that's been presented to you, just like any other portion of life, and deal with it in a way that you have no value attachment to it. Well, that's impossible. You can't do that. That's ridiculous. I'm not a guru. I don't want to live that way. Yeah, well, I kept living the way that I normally did, and I finally came around to his way because it was a heck of a lot more peaceful and satisfying.
That's
So
so good.
the idea that these externals pound you into the dust, if you stop and just think about it for a moment, you remember that you have the capacity as a human being to decide how it's going to affect you and to give it the value that you think it's entitled to. And that could be zero value, even in things that are uh, believed by consensus by most people to be horrible. You can give it no value. And that's a powerful place to be. That is a very powerful place to be.
Man, Rick, that's beautiful, man. Thank you so much. I love this idea of this, and thank you for a great show.
Thanks for bringing it up. I love talking about it. I'm still struggling with it. So please, everyone needs to understand. None of this stuff you get to when you're at the plateau or the mountaintop and you say, I've got it. I don't have to do it anymore. It's got to be a practice.
It has to be. It has to be. Thank you, Rick. I love you.
I love you, Keith. Bye-bye.